Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 407 News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Garrett Ziegler will join us. He's the founder of Marco Polo, and Hunter Biden is dropping his lawsuit against him. He ran out of money. The art isn't selling anymore for some reason. Garrett will react to all of that. And Ginny Gentles is here at 5 o'clock from the Education, Freedom, and Parental Rights Initiative at the Defense for Freedom Institute. Lots of words that mean freedom, which I like. We'll talk to Ginny about freeing ourselves of the Department of Education potentially very soon. And you can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The VA Secretary, the Department of Veterans Affairs, is now former Congressman Doug Collins. And he released a video this week explaining that they're trying to right-size the VA, get rid of all the inefficiencies so that they can better serve the veterans. And in doing that, they say they've got to make some cuts to the staff, too. So take a listen.
The VA has been a punching bag among veterans, Congress, and the media for decades. Things need to change. We owe America's veterans and the hundreds and thousands of excellent VA employees solutions. For many years, veterans have been asking for a more efficient, accountable, and transparent VA. This administration is finally going to give the veterans what they want. President Trump has a mandate for generational change in Washington, and that's exactly what we're going to deliver at the VA. We're going to make the department work better for the veterans, families, caregivers, and survivors we are charged with serving.
He says that they want to reduce the workforce by 15%, but not affect benefits.
In response to President Trump's Department of Government Efficiency and Workforce Optimization Initiative, VA is conducting a department-wide review of its organization, operations, and structure. Central to these efforts is a pragmatic and disciplined approach to eliminating waste and bureaucracy, increasing efficiency, and improving health care, benefits, and services to veterans. This will be a thorough and thoughtful review based on input from career VA employees, senior executives, as well as the top VA leaders. Our goal is to reduce VA employment levels to 2019 in-strength numbers, roughly 398,000 employees, from our current level of approximately 470,000 employees. Now that's a 15% decrease. We're going to accomplish this without making cuts to health care or benefits to veterans and VA beneficiaries. VA will always fulfill its duty to provide veterans, families, caregivers, and survivors the health care and benefits they have earned.
So can it be done? Can you trim the workforce at the VA and improve outcomes for the veterans who need a functioning VA? Wade Miller is a U.S. Marine senior advisor at the Center for Renewing America, and he joins us now. Sir, good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
The challenges at the VA we routinely hear are pretty immense, and they continue to this day. Lots of problems for people being able to even gain access to the VA, getting the runaround. How do you assess it right now?
Big problems. The first Trump administration moved in the right direction. They really worked with Congress on the Mission Act, which was, a really important piece of legislation to reduce the need for veterans to use VA-specific hospitals so they could use community hospitals near them. And, of course, the Biden administration walked that back, and it put more of a focus on making veterans have to use VA hospitals. So there's all sorts of efficiencies that can be found just by going back to the first Trump administration policies and really reinforcing the Mission Act and putting resources to that program, because then all of a sudden it reduces the reliance and need of VA facilities and staff. It's an easy efficiency just right there that can be had, and it's already in law.
And that one in particular, just thinking it through, I can think of two big reasons why that's important. One, you decrease wait times because you're not overwhelming one facility. And then two, you don't require veterans to travel, perhaps in some cases hours, just to get to their appointment. They can go to something much closer to them.
That's exactly right. When I moved to D.C., I'm a VA patient. I re-enrolled in Dallas. I had one about 10 minutes away. I moved to D.C. The one near me was full, so they enrolled me in one that was over an hour away, and that's without traffic. And everyone who's in D.C. knows that you never don't have traffic.
Right.
So it was just I never used the VA. I paid out of pocket because it was such an inconvenience. It's just not an effective and efficient system. There's better ways. And if you think about it, we've got Medicaid, we've got Medicare programs. You don't build an entirely new medical system just to serve those people. It works within the existing hospital frameworks within the nation. We already have a hospital system. It makes no sense for us to create a specific carved out resource because you're right. It increases wait times. I've had examples in my past where I had to wait months and months and months to get an MRI or an EMG when I could have just gone down the road and got it within a week at a private hospital system. It just doesn't make any sense, and I'm really excited that Doug Collins and his team are there to fix this problem.
So when they say they're going to reduce the workforce by 15%, you heard Doug Collins just lay out that they have about 470,000 employees right now. They want to trim it down to just a little bit under 400,000, putting them back actually in the Trump era strength of the workforce size. It would be around it was 2019 when it was last that size. Do every one of these employees serve some sort of care-based purpose for veterans, or is there a lot of fat at this agency?
No, there's a huge amount of bureaucracy. I'd like to see a study out there that's commissioned, like how many VA employees are actually just nurses and or doctors or primary health care, therapists that, for PTSD. My guess is that the number is shockingly high, as is every bureaucracy in the government. Very few of those people who are employed actually serve the function and purpose of that agency. So there's plenty of rot here. We did a federal government-wide survey on DEI spending and funding. There's a huge DEI bureaucracy at the VA, that can be defunded just right there. That's an easy one. But there's so many bureaucracies that are redundant, unnecessary, yes, or duplicative. At one point, I think there were 6 different veteran suicide programs. Why not figure out which one is the best and put all of our resources into that one?
That's
the kind of stuff that's been happening for decades.
There's a lot of waste there, it turns out. The VA Secretary Doug Collins pointing out earlier this week, they've looked through the contracts and they're finding all sorts of garbage. Take a listen to this. Let's see here. Stand by.
Here's just one example. We're conducting a comprehensive review of the VA's 90,000 contracts, which are worth more than $67 billion. After reviewing roughly 2% of those contracts, we were able to cancel nearly 600 non-mission critical or duplicative agreements that will save the department roughly $900 million.
Well, that's a pretty good return. So just looking at 2% of the contracts that the VA has, they're saving nearly $1 billion already, Wade Miller.
That's right. And this has been institutionalized through Congress for decades where, if you propose spending money at the VA on something or issue a contract, you're pro-veteran. And if you try to cut it, you're anti-veteran. And so it just builds on itself to where
yes,
you have all of this waste and abuse and fraud and duplicativeness. So you really have to have a team that is ready to face that onslaught of, name calling and claiming that
yes,
they're anti-veteran, when in reality, that's, as conservatives, we're just used to that. So, run into oncoming traffic, understand they're going to call you names, do what you need to do to take care of veterans, and that's what they're doing right now.
Well, that's exactly right. And you see this in every other debate that we're having about government spending right now. You find out that on the Social Security rolls that people are listed as being hundreds of years old. Normal people say, well, why don't you clean up the Social Security rolls? The left says, don't you dare touch Social Security. They're acting as if you're cutting benefits for seniors. The same is true of Medicare and Medicaid, where you're looking at over $100 billion in fraud estimated each and every year. You say, we got to clean up that fraud. They say, you are going to strip away Medicare for seniors. You're going to strip away Medicaid for needy Americans. They just lie about what's actually going on. And these are agencies that are desperately in need of efficiency reform.
That's right. And I think that the new team here is committed to that vision, and everything I've seen so far vindicates that viewpoint. And it's just going to get worse. The closer they get to solving this problem and actually improving veteran health care, the more the left will call names, because they realize that if we can spend far less, make the system far better, and improve health care for veterans, it's going to be a real black eye for the left on all of this nonsense that they've been piling on all the wasteful spending that they've been pushing forward in the name of helping veterans while not really doing that at all.
Yeah, not at all. All right, Wade Miller, you're a great veteran, Marine, senior advisor at the Center for Renewing America. Sir, thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks for having me on.
Good to talk to you. You know, on this point about the people who are complaining that you're trying to fix the VA, Secretary Collins had this to say.
There are many people complaining about the changes we're making at the VA. But what most of them are really saying is, let's just keep doing the same thing at the VA has always done. No, not going to happen. The days of kicking the can down the road and measuring VA's progress by how much money it spends and how many people it employs rather than how many veterans it helps are over.
You know, it is impressive to go to the VA and have this task in front of you and be like, that's a big deal, right? I mean, this is an agency that our veterans desperately care about. They want to have it work efficiently, that Americans should care about, and it's a huge mess. Every time the left gets a hold of it, it becomes messier and messier. And so Doug Collins, it's not like, this is not easy street. It's not, you know, you're not going in there and it's like, oh, you're the Secretary of the Veterans Affairs. Like it's going to be something great for the rest of your life. No, Doug Collins, the rest of his career is going to be defined by how he handles this very difficult situation at an agency that we need actually working on behalf of the people who were willing to sacrifice their lives for us, our veterans. Bob's in Pensacola, Florida, on line 1. Bob, good afternoon, sir. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Congratulations on that time slot change.
Thank you, Bob.
I don't think the time slot's anything special, but it's definitely acknowledgement of your talent, and congratulations.
That's really nice. Thanks, Bob.
No problem. My son joined the Army right out of high school, fought in Afghanistan. He came back after 4 years honorable discharge, and his life has just, you know, you could watch it degrade over time. And until he ended up in Phoenix, he became homeless. The VA did put him in a place there. So he had VA housing for a while, but they, out of nowhere, kicked him out on the street in lieu of, I believe, housing migrants. So we were able to convince him to come live with us here in Pensacola, and he's been here since September, and we've tried to get him into the VA here since the day he arrived.
Go ahead. Finish that thought. I want to hear it.
Sure. Since the day he arrived, and so those appointments are a month and a half to 2 months out.
Yeah.
And every time that we've come up to that appointment, the day before they call and say we have to cancel and reschedule, and it's another month and a half or 2 months down the road. And this has happened 3-4 times now. And the boy's got PTSD and needs help, and he just can't get it.
He just can't get it. Oh, my gosh. I can't even imagine what you're going through here, Bob, with your son. What year was he booted from the VA living facility?
So that would have been June of last year.
June of last year, and you believe it was because illegal migrants were being housed there?
That is my interpretation of what happened there. Yes, sir.
I mean, it really is as bad as you think, isn't it? It's amazing to hear a story like this. Bob, I really hope. I mean, your call is a clear sign that the VA is in desperate need of reform, and I'm hoping Doug Collins is the man for the job. And that you get some answers quickly on this. But I appreciate you sharing this story because it just adds to the urgency to get this fixed.
Thanks for covering this stuff. It's terrible.
Thank you, Bob. Bob in Pensacola, Florida. His son's a soldier, served our country, needs help now. And God willing, he gets it as the Trump administration tries to fix up the VA. It's 4:20. Love Mark Levin. Mark. I wasn't listening the other night. Mark, somebody sent me. I think Corey. Actually, you did, Dave. Dave sent me the clip of Mark shouting me out the news of the switch to 12-3. So generous. What a nice guy, him and his wife. They're just wonderful people. And an honor to be here on this station with them. He's a good dude. Let's see. I've got Susan calling in from Woodbridge, line 2. Susan, good afternoon. You are on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hi, thank you. Good afternoon. So I just wanted to say, as a veteran and a retired Army person, I just wanted to tell you the difference that I've noticed. I never would have thought of using VA healthcare in the past because of the reputation it had. But when Trump came in office the first time, I gave it a try, and I can tell you I was 100% pleased with the results. He's the one that instituted the VA choice, meaning you can pick your doctor outside of the VA health clinic. You don't have to drive 3 hours to get to the clinic. You can go to your local
Right.
medical doctor if you wanted to. He's the one that instituted the VA hotline. You'd call that hotline, and you will get results. People will hop and pop. When Biden came on board, I could see the drastic change. The healthcare access reduced, and I can tell you when Doge goes in there and peels that onion back, they will find that our VA dollars are going, I don't know what you said earlier today, but it's going towards illegal aliens. That's where our VA dollars are going. And that means that we as veterans do not get the health care access that we deserve. So I'm looking forward to getting that access back and seeing some better results that Biden had kind of squashed when he was in office.
And isn't that the most typical? Isn't that the most typical thing ever? Which is that the government takes an agency that most people agree should be well funded, so it can take care of a critical group of people. That is the nation's veterans. And instead, they turn it into a slush fund for other things, and then say, if you dare take a look at it, oh, you're hurting the nation's veterans. They use veterans as human shields for out of control, corrupt behavior. In other words, and you can detect it immediately, Susan. You detected it from administration to administration. Fortunately for the nation's veterans, for all of us, I think, President Trump back in office, hopefully they can institute some permanent changes and efficiencies that will help insulate even against Democrat control. But it's always a difficult thing. Even when it's on the books, Democrats sometimes refuse to do it, like, securing borders. They refuse. But Susan, thank you for that.
True. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. There's Susan in Woodbridge, a soldier, a veteran. Good to have her call us today. Hey, coming up, I've got Garrett Ziegler going to join us. He's the founder of Marco Polo, and he's been sued. He was sued for some time by Hunter Biden, who didn't like that he shared the contents of the laptop from hell. And it turns out Hunter has decided he's tapping out now. It's not working anymore because he's running out of funds. Nobody's buying his macaroni art anymore for some strange reason. What could it be? What could it be? We'll ask Garrett Ziegler next. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's 4:35 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, top of the hour, Ginny Gentles will join us. We'll talk education with her as President Trump is contemplating getting rid of that Department of Education. Some chatter this week. There's an executive order being prepared on that front. We'll talk to Ginny about that. And we'll talk to you at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Hunter Biden is a world-famous artist. He really is. Do you remember back to the early years of the Biden presidency when the press would ask a couple of half-hearted questions about Hunter Biden selling his finger paintings for massive amounts of money? This is what Circle Backy Jen Psaki said at the time.
Well, I can tell you that after careful consideration, a system has been established that allows for Hunter Biden to work in his profession within reasonable safeguards. Of course, he has the right to pursue an artistic career, just like any child of a president has the right to pursue a career. But all interactions regarding the selling of art and the setting of prices will be handled by a professional gallerist adhering to the highest industry standards, and any offer out of the normal course would be rejected out of hand, and the gallerist will not share information about buyers or prospective buyers, including their identities with Hunter Biden or the administration, which provides quite a level of protection and transparency.
Of course, everything about that was a lie. It was a corrupt scheme. He knew exactly who was buying the art. It was being bought at absurd rates in order to buy access to the Biden administration. And since then, well, wouldn't you know it, all of a sudden, Hunter Biden is now claiming that he's broke and that the art's not selling. Yeah, it's just sticking to dad's fridge with a magnet now. Joining us to discuss all of this is Garrett Ziegler. He's the founder of Marco Polo, a former deputy to the Trump White House advisor, Peter Navarro, and the man who posted the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop from hell online. Hello, Garrett.
Good afternoon, Vince. Appreciate you having me on.
I'm glad to have you on, Garrett. The news today, in part, no small part, is the fact that Hunter Biden is dropping his lawsuit against you for having posted the contents of the laptop. And He says he's out of money because nobody's buying the artwork. What do you make of that?
I think it's a convenient excuse, and he's doing this in part because we have scheduled depositions for him and his sugar brother, Kevin Morris, who's a central figure in the lawfare campaign against us. So what they're trying to do is use the emotional pull of the Palisades fire, which is obviously tragic. And because we're not ogres, we don't want anybody's house to burn down, but I would be remiss if I didn't remind your audience that it wasn't Hunter's house. He was just in a rental. So the person who's actually facing prejudice is the person who's got to deal with a real insurance claim. Kevin Morris is the one who's paying for the rental house. So this is a convenient excuse for Hunter to get out of a deposition. That's what this is really about. And we just filed our opposition papers about 4 minutes ago. We only had 24 hours to do so because Hunter is seeking a dismissal ex parte, Vince, which means that he wants to do it. He wants to do this without prejudice. So if he finds a new benefactor, if somebody buys his finger paintings in the future, he can bring this lawfare against us again. So we're actually opposing this dismissal on the grounds that Hunter wants them. We would like to have it dismissed, yes, but with costs, meaning Hunter pays our $197,000 of attorney's fees, and for it to be dismissed with prejudice. So if he doesn't find a new donor, he can't just bring it in a different venue or jurisdiction.
He can't bring it back. Do you think he's telling the truth about his financial situation right now? I mean, they basically say we're out of money to continue the litigation. Do you think that's true?
No. What is, and we just put that in our papers. What's happening is Morris. The only thing that's true in Hunter's filings is that he sold less art, mostly because his dad is out of office, although he didn't put that in the declaration. It's that Morris is likely telling him, hey, abandon ship here. I don't want to be deposed. In all of the other civil cases, Morris has not had to deal with the threat of being deposed. And so he's probably telling Hunter, hey, I am the money bags. I have control over whether you can afford this or not. I'm telling you to drop this. And they're going to the extraordinary step of requesting an ex parte dismissal without prejudice. So I'm glad, by the way, that we're having this conversation at 4:30 Eastern because we just filed. I've been up all night working with our attorneys we only had 24 hours. So basically they're trying to do the legal equivalent of a mulligan. I'm not a golfer, but you know what that is, and we're not going to allow it.
Amazing. Okay, so Kevin Morris, just to dwell on him for another moment, we talk about the artwork. Isn't it the case that Kevin Morris was one of the people who was buying all of this art?
Precisely. He told the Congress that he bought 11 pieces for $875,000, but what that essentially did was just decrease the total amount in loans. So remember, he gave all this money to Hunter, and then post facto, they papered it over as loans, and they're forgivable loans. So I think the Fed should look into Morris. And again, we don't have paper for this. That's why I'm saying the Fed should look into it. Unlike the many other crimes we have Hunter on, I can't accuse Morris of any crime right now because I don't know what they're planning to do with these loans. Hunter's obviously not going to pay him back. And if Morris tries to then say they're forgivable, he will have effectively evaded the gift tax. So that's what there's millions of dollars at stake in gift taxes here. And so that's why Morris is terrified because we're going to be deposing him on those questions.
Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, of course, stinks to high heaven. Hunter Biden has received untold sums of money from Kevin Morris in the form of loans. In other words, say again?
$7 million is the last count.
$7 million in the forms of loans. In other words, Hunter would not have to declare those loans as income and therefore would be able to evade paying taxes on the money he was receiving. And he's getting, and as I recall, Kevin Morris was, and I think you've covered some of these things here, Garrett Ziegler. Kevin Morris was paying for his travel to and from court proceedings about custody. He was paying for his residence in California. He was paying to, quote, buy all of this artwork. So the guy who's loaning the money is also giving money outright in the form of a purchase of the artwork, and was doing all of this at a time where Hunter Biden was a massive liability for his father's political career. It seemed like Kevin Morris was kind of hovering over Hunter to try and prevent it from becoming more damaging.
Precisely. And no other group has really dug into Morris besides the U.S. Congress. So the reason why, and I should mention to your audience that Morris has sued us in California State Court, and that's currently in the appellate system because we partially won. So he's appealing it to the California State Court, and if we win that, he owes us about $250,000 in legal fees. So Morris hates us because we realized very quickly that this scam is not possible without his cash. So Doge is rightly focusing and following the money, but we were following the money on this stuff back in 2021, and It's only possible with Morris.
And also at the core of the lawsuit that Hunter filed against you, this idea that this was somehow his information that you posted to the internet. By the time you got a hold of this thing and it went up on the internet, it didn't even belong to Hunter Biden. It belonged, to anybody, to John Paul Mac Isaac, the laptop repair shop guy. The FBI had full custody of this. The government had copies of all of this. I mean, you posted something that was of immense public interest that wasn't even owned by Hunter Biden.
Well said. We put that in our motion to dismiss, but we're dealing with a corrupt court. The judge in our federal case with Hunter is an appointee of the plaintiff's father. We requested recusal, and he refused to recuse himself, a la Juan Merchan in Trump's New York case. So we're dealing with a cooked system, and let's put it this way, if we do not get dismissal with prejudice, we're going to be appealing it. This is an abuse of the legal system. So if we don't get what we want in the district court, we're going to go to the appellate court. And we're fully aware that the Ninth Circuit is liberal, but we don't think it's going to be this bad. And at least we'll have the chance of 3 new souls on the panel viewing this with fresh eyes.
So, again, the news that you are bringing to us this hour, because you just filed moments ago, is Hunter Biden is trying to drop this lawsuit against you right now. But you are saying you don't want the lawsuit dropped. You want it sustained at the moment because the only circumstance that you'd say it should be dropped is with prejudice.
Precisely. And we put that in our paper saying in the alternative, if you were to grant Mr. Biden's motion, it must be with prejudice because we are going to be severely hurt. And this is unfair. Usually ex partes are reserved in, one example is, let's say you have a domestic violence issue where the guy is just beating on his wife and she needs an emergency order. That's an extreme case, but that's what ex parte is for because it only gives the responding party 24 hours. So we had to respond to all this in 24 hours, whereas if he followed the normal process, we get a week.
Yeah.
So if you're dismissing a case, why would you need to do it ex parte? Why don't you give the opportunity, the opposition a week? Because they want to get this through the back door. They don't want us to present, and thank God we stayed up all night to do it, is this is severely prejudicial to us. This is not how the legal system is supposed to work. And that's why if it does get dismissed, we want with attorney's fees so that we can be made whole. Because if he allows this without prejudice, Hunter's just washing his hands.
Let me pull away from your lawsuit for a moment, the fight you're having with Hunter Biden, to just ask you for the big picture here. I mean, Hunter, of course, loses all of this funding for his artwork, which, as I recall, the media for years told us was entirely defensible for Hunter Biden to sell art. The White House said it was entirely defensible. The media even, I remember them running segments saying that it was actually really good. It's like, it's very quality art, the kind of thing that people would pay $500,000 per painting for. And yet, obviously, with the passage of time, more and more evidence that was just a gigantic lie. What have we all learned together, Garrett, as administrations have changed and certainly fortunes have changed for the Bidens?
I think we've learned that the work – I'm usually very critical of the House Republicans, but they did 2 very valuable things, which is they got Morris and Hunter in for their depositions, and we've included those depositions within our motions just filed. And those depositions clearly lay out that they're forgivable loans, that Morris could try to wipe his hand. And essentially what we have is sophisticated money laundering. It's sophisticated money laundering. And they are obsessed, ironically, with supposed Russian compromise of Donald Trump. I know that Morris specifically is part of the Midas Touch Lincoln Project PDS crowd. But the tactics they're using, Vince, are the exact tactics that Russian oligarchs use when they purchase high-end art to launder money. Now, the ironic and funny thing is that Hunter's art isn't even high-end. It's stuff that you'd find on the wall of a Holiday Inn where I live in Effingham, Illinois. It's hotel art.
Well, that's something. It's better than I could do. If you could do hotel art, you're beyond my skill. That's for sure.
I agree, but guess what? You and I aren't hubristic enough to try to sell this stuff for $400,000.
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. It really is amazing. And then lastly, Kevin Morris. Again, as I recall, he comes into Hunter Biden's life right as Joe Biden is running for president at a campaign event. As he was launching his candidacy, Kevin Morris meets Hunter Biden at a gathering, I think, of donors. And my theory on it has always been that he sees Hunter and he realizes the trouble that he's not a kid, but this man is going to be for Joe's campaign, and he decides, I'm going to come flying in. I'm going to save this campaign by taking over Hunter's life.
Mm-hmm. We now know through the IRS whistleblowers that they were looking into FEC violations. We know that because of an email released by the Congress, voted on by the committee, that Shapley produced, that said they were, quote, FEC issues with Patrick Morris. Kevin's first name is Patrick. So we know they were probing into this, whether or not it'll get resurrected, because it's still within the statute of limitations, barely. It's going to be barely within the 5-year mark. But again, this is not some $2,200 illegal straw donor scheme. This is on just the taxes about $3 million. This is serious cash, and I think our federal government would fail if they didn't look into this. I mean, we have an email from the House committee from January of 2020. Kevin Morris says, and I quote, I'm looking at my computer screen right now, "We're under considerable risk politically to get the returns in." So through other means and through the Congress, we now know that Hunter made that big tax payment with Kevin's loan money. So we have the entire timeline.
Yeah.
They're telling their lawyers, hey, we're under political risk to get the returns in. Hunter submits the return with Kevin Morris's loan money. So if it weren't political, he wouldn't be paying for it.
I know. And meanwhile, they convicted Trump for calling a legal payment in private documents. It's so crazy. It is so unbelievable.
What was it, $140K to Stormy? I mean, it wasn't even – the scale isn't even comparable.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you point out, the statute of limitations is about to run. So I'm glad you reminded everyone who's listening of that. Thank you. Hey, Garrett Ziegler, founder of Marco Polo, thanks for staying in the fight and for updating us today. All right, let's go to Dennis in Annapolis. He's on line 2. Dennis, good afternoon, sir. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. First, congratulations on doing the new gig at noontime there.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Hunter needs to do some more painting on velvet and do some pictures of Elvis and set up shop at any large intersection to do a starving artist sale.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So you could do like an Eastern Market thing. Just go out there or hang out in Farragut Square, see if you can sell some of this stuff. Yeah, that'd be good. And just test the market economics of whether or not his art is actually feasible or if he'd better find a new line of work.
Yes, Vince, exactly.
I love that.
Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, thanks, Dennis. That's a smart idea. I want to see how good that art is. Is it just hotel art, or is it better than that? Amazing. Let me see. Mike is calling in from Gainesville. He's on line 1. Hello, Mike. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I hope DOJ looks into finding whether Kevin Morris's relatives have NGOs set up all around the country that are funneling him money to give to the Biden children or whatever's going on there. But we got to tie this all up in a knot and finally put a bow on it and figure out that all these Democrats are basically paying themselves to be unpatriotic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in other words, just kind of see if we can't stitch together all of this and demonstrate how this money that flowed into the government was designed to get a huge return out of our site.
Yeah, it's just amazing that this much graft can be going on right under our noses, and we were all sort of oblivious to it, just trying to compete with it. We've got to figure out that this needs to be identified as like 40% of our GDP is basically corruption in government now.
It sure seems like it. And, with artwork of all things, isn't it interesting and how cartoonish their corruption is? It's the most brazen possible form. It's like artwork is very famously used in money laundering schemes. And Hunter said, okay, I'll do that. It was, instead of like trying to be subtle about it, they're like, okay, we're just going to make a bunch of artwork and then have somebody pay absurd levels of money for it, and then we'll just call it a day.
Yes, and they figure the media's on their side so they can just gaslight us into saying you're all conspiratorial thinking and this is just silly and you should look at something else.
Yeah, we're used to that, aren't we, Mike? Hey, Mike, thank
Nothing
you.
to see here.
Thank you very much, Mike in Gainesville. Bunch of good points. Trying to stitch all this together. Finally put a bow on it, as he says. Coming up, Ginny Gentles will be with us. We're going to talk to her about, as we often do, education, specifically the Department of Education. Did you know that in the entire existence of that agency, it's never once improved outcomes for students? Ever? Oh, okay. So maybe let's get rid of it. President Trump wants to. Will he do it imminently? We'll talk to Ginny Gentles next.